Okay. Going to talk to us about general services contract?
I think I'm going to do this.
Oh, you're going to do that, okay.
I'm going to do this.
The schedule is wrong.
Well, I talked to, well, I'm on the sheet too.
Okay, cool.
This is a very important contract to me, and so I wanted to be up front and center.
Okay,
get the chance to talk about it.
There you go.
We have had general services consultant contracts for the past 5 years, and what we use these contracts for is across the agency, from augmenting planning, public engagement, design, architecture, assistance with everything up to construction. And we use these task work order-based contracts in order to augment some of our smaller projects. The larger projects we still put out for bid. So this is an action item to take to the board about our new general services consultant contracts, which we've procured using qualifications-based procurement. These would be task work order-based contracts for the entire agency to use. So the teams that were selected have multiple disciplines available to the agency. We went through a normal procurement process for qualifications-based procurement and selected 3 firms or teams of firms that would be AECOM, HNTB, and WSP. And so what we're asking for today is a recommendation to approve these contracts. They would be valued at a not to exceed of $2 million, have a 3-year contract term with 2 one-year extensions. So what this means is that whether the time runs out or the money runs out, first, it's whatever comes first, the contract ends. These are pretty typical contracts for an agency like ours. FDOT has GECs that are worth $5 million to $20 million over a 5-year period, and they use them for all kinds of things. So this is kind of a low value for general engineering or general services contracts.
Okay, questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Sam. Does each one of these firms have a specific specialty, or just kind of depending on the project, you just kind of go with one you're more comfortable with?
They have, all of the teams have a range of services. So a lot of them are duplicative, meaning we could go to any one of the teams for a certain service. What this does is it allows us to pick somebody who we haven't used before, right? Maybe rotate through. Sometimes if we want one consultant to review something or one consultant to write the scope while the other one does the work, we can do that. And it allows us to get some balance.
Do they bill hourly? Do they bill hourly or by the project, or?
By the project. So each task work order comes to the project manager. They develop a scope and a fee estimate. If that fee estimate is over a certain amount, it comes to the board anyway. So you get to approve those task work orders that are above $100,000 per the policies of the board. And then they bill usually on an hour by hour based on the contract rate that we set up.
Commissioner Eggers?
Yeah, I think that was my question. So we're just approving the 3 of them, $2 million max over 3 years.
Right.
Over 5.
Over
max of
5
5.
years, a max of 5, yeah.
Okay, so
3 plus 2.
Okay, so that is $2 million for 5 years.
For each.
What's that?
For each, yes, for each contract. A $2 million upset limit for each contract.
For each of the 3?
Right.
Yeah. So the way it works is that there's no obligation of any funds right now. It's just awarding these contracts, these 3 contracts to these 3 firms, and then we will be issuing task orders for different pieces of work over the next 5 years. And at any time that either 3 things could happen. At the end of a 3-year contract, we could say, well, we just think there's some kind of problem with that firm, or they went out of business or something well, not that, but we could not exercise the 2 years. Don't think that'll happen because these are the 3 of the largest firms and they've been in existence, and we've actually had 2 of them under contract for a while. So if we have used one firm for $2 million worth, then their contract ends. Or if they hit 5 years, and even if we haven't used them at all, their contract ends.
And every project that's over, as you said, 100,000 comes to the board for approval.
So an
Yeah.
example of that is the community bus plan. We were able to put the community bus plan as a planning project under one of our existing general services consultant contracts that came to you one month as an information item, the next month as an action item. But we were able to speed the delivery of that project because we already had the qualifications-based procurement contract.
Got it.
Any other questions? Can you give us a couple of examples of things that we did last year, or last couple of years, with using this methodology?
Sure. The community bus plan, which I just mentioned,
Yeah.
we were able to use one of our consultants that we teamed with the MPO. So we had a project where we wanted to fund part of it and they wanted to fund part of it. It was the State Road 60 corridor study. So we had one consultant that was on both of our contracts, so we each gave them a task work order and put it together, so we were able to partner with other agencies that way very easily. So that was another, the downtown circulation study that we did in downtown
The
St.
design of the Clearwater.
Yeah.
The design of the Clearwater
Okay.
Beach Transit Center.
I just want to get a handle on what kinds of things we're talking about in that price range and so fit the bill.
And it could be something as small as we need extra staff members for a public engagement event that we're doing.
All right, good. All right, any other questions?
Move approval?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Consent or regular
consent.
board?
Thank you.
Consent?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
If you are fantasy baseball fans, then you should note WSP is formerly known as Parsons Brinkerhoff, and Scott Pringle,
Yeah.
who used to play for Jacobs, now he plays for WSP.
All right.
Who's on first?
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for a player to be named
All
later.
right. Okay,
Morning.
settlements, huh?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I checked the
Keep
chair
us,
first.
keep us
to
out
make
of court,
sure-
right?
I checked the chair to make sure we had all the wheels today.
Right.
Safety first.
All right.
Oh, Diane Randall, Director of Risk Management. I'm here this morning for the action to recommend board approval of a settlement with Timothy Miller in the amount of $40,000. This is a intersection accident. PSTA entered an intersection on a red light and collided with Mr. Miller's vehicle. And let me confirm there's no relation between Mr. Miller and Mr. Miller. His injuries included his neck, mid-back, low back, shoulder, left arm, and right elbow. Surgery has been recommended for the right elbow, and to date, his out-of-pocket medical expenses are just under $30,000, and that does not include the surgery. The plaintiff filed a proposal for settlement in the amount of $40,000, and we feel that even if we took this to trial, we could not do any better than that. So we're asking for approval to go forward with the settlement for $40,000.
Any questions?
Second.
Okay, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
All right, with this kind of an arrangement, let's say something goes south on the surgery, okay? Does that reopen? Do we have a reopen clause or anything like
No.
that? We're out of this picture no matter
We're
what.
completely finished. They
Okay.
sign a release that completely relieves us of all future responsibility.
Okay.
The odds are he probably will not have the surgery,
Mhm.
but if he should, we have no responsibility whatsoever.
Okay. All right, very good. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan.
Thanks, man.
Okay,
Oh, consent.
Yes.
yes. Okay,
Morning.
now, who's gonna be talking on this one? So I want to choose Al.
I'll be happy to talk about this one. As we've been preparing for our triennial and doing a lot of reviews, we found that we have on our books this lease agreement with FDOT for a parcel, very small piece of parcel for a park and ride in Oldsmar. This lease was entered into in 2000. We haven't used the park and ride since 2004. The cost to PSTA is $0 each year. And when we've asked, will we ever use this parcel of land looking forward, we do not see any use for it. So we are looking to get out of the lease. When this lease agreement was written, it did not allow the CEO to have the legal right to unwind the lease agreement. So that's why we're bringing the action item to you and to go to the board, is to be able to get out of this. We have Dave Newell from, he's way in the back there, from FDOT. FDOT is fine with us terminating this lease agreement. So the action item is to approve termination of the park and ride lease.
Okay. Questions? Let me ask our expert from North County, what's your opinion on this particular issue?
I don't think there's any kind of issue on this at all. I don't see any need for it. If you all had identified any remote ideas that we could use it for, I mean, I'd be all about it.
No, we have not.
Good.
To the naked eye, you cannot tell that this parcel is a parking lot.
Uh-huh.
It looks like it just looks like part of the right-of-way of the road.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right, move approval.
I don't know what's the good
All right.
one.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I think that's definitely something we can put on consent
All
agenda.
right, thank you.
Okay.
But I think it's good to note that our legal counsel, Alan Zuma, gave the opinion that the CEO does not have the power to sell, like, PSTA off or anything. That the board has to approve that. That made me feel good.
Pretty crafty how he did that, huh?
No, yeah, I mean,
Okay.
that's what's going, yeah.
All right, desktop hardware. Who's gonna talk to us on that? Al,
Or Al?
okay.
Al's off the hook
Okay.
all day today.
Andy, all right, go.
Good, the project is sold out.
We're
Yeah,
right
we
along
should
with
defend
that.
our projects.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So we have an action item here for a desktop replacement of not to exceed $200,000. Currently, right now, the PSTA has workstations that have reached the end of their useful life. They're slowing down, they're running out of memory, and there's a lot of issues as they get older, especially with new applications that we have put in place. So PSTA has the need to procure new workstations to carry out this upgrade, and the contractor will be required to replace the existing workstations with new ones that are capable of handling all these new applications that we have in place. In March, PSTA released an invitation for bids soliciting competitive bids from experienced, qualified, and capable vendors to supply the complete desktop hardware. The RFP was posted on the website. Demand start and direct notice was sent to approximately about 71 suppliers. Out of those 71 suppliers, we have 7 that have responded to the bids, and the procurement and IT staff have reviewed all of these bids from all the suppliers that met our demands. And on this result, Voluntary was selected as the lowest price, the most responsive bidder, and therefore we are recommending the contract to be awarded to them.
Okay. Questions? Yes, go ahead. Commissioner Schulman.
How long are the new desktops expected to last?
These will get us over 5 years. The normal life cycle is about 5 years. But what we've done in the past is usually the store-bought or off-the-shelf computers, a year or two later, we're upgrading RAM, we're upgrading memory, because applications that are getting updated, they're becoming more heavily, processing speeds and power. So we are constantly upgrading the components of our past computers that we have purchased. These particular computers, they're customized. They're customized to our needs based off of our reports from help desk and 8 months of going through and finding out what our users are going to need. So therefore, we have customized these computers that will last us well into the 5 years without needing, taking out operational expenses to buy more RAM or larger hard drives or processors.
And what happens to the old desktops?
Well, in the past, we've sold them off to vendors. They'll buy them back from us, pennies on the dollar.
I'd like to add to that. We have a process that we use to liquidate all assets, and typically, I've been working with Debbie on some new approaches, putting them on there's public websites that things can go on auction. So we're going to look at all different options to make sure we get the most out of the equipment.
And what my thought process was just making sure that this doesn't include, this is just for the purchase, we're not exchanging, we're relinquishing our ability
Correct.
to
This
find
is
the
just
best
for the
place for the
purchase.
hardware to go.
This is just for the purchase.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
How do
Commissioner
we get
Evers.
FTA funding for something? I mean, what is that all about? How does FTA fund computers? I mean,
Computers are specially identified as count as capital,
right?
even though they only have a useful life of 5 years or so. It's relatively short, but technology like computers are eligible for federal capital formula funds that are in our capital CIP.
Commissioner Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you're recommending Voluntary as the company that's going to procure these, or is that the brand name of the equipment that's going to be supplied?
Good question, sir. We went out for a public procurement. These are the actual companies that actually submitted bids. This was a hard bid. We went through the process of submitting all the bid packets to Andy and IT staff so they can make sure that they check the box on all the IT requirements. Voluntary was the lowest responsive bidder. I'd be remiss not to let you know that we did have someone that came in a little bit lower than Voluntary. However, they took exception to a lot of our T's and C's, and through the official invitation for bid process, that's not allowed.
Right. But I mean, I understand that, and thank you for that. But like, for instance, Staples Business Advantage, there isn't a branded computer called Staples.
No.
So I mean, are they speccing Dell equipment, or what's the?
These are HP computers. We are an HP shop, so we like to stay with HP. They've been pretty good.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? I have a couple questions. Does this bid include all the related software that's either peculiar to our needs or routinely purchased software like some Microsoft programs, Word and Excel and those kinds of regular programs? Because normally when you buy a computer, you have to buy those separately. So that's all included in this pricing structure.
No. The Windows license is included on this. Every operating system has a Windows license. The software will be done separately.
So that's not part of this bid?
It's not. This is just hardware.
Okay. Does the FTA fund those kinds of things, or does that come out of our operating budget?
Well, typically, the issue we often find with software, especially our unique, expensive transit software programs that are like the backbone, they won't pay for the pretty expensive annual licensing agreements, software licensing agreements. That's an operating expense.
Okay.
Usually, the upfront purchase might be eligible as a capital, but then where the software companies use on like annual
Right.
fees.
Okay. All right, so other than those types of expenses, we don't have any other expenses associated with this transfer process?
No.
That's, okay.
This is hard.
So this is a pretty good number, it's hard, so we can work with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Do I hear a motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Consent. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're gonna find out how we're doing.
Exactly.
Okay, Chris?
All right.
Morning.
All right.
Good
Hi.
morning. Let me have you share that around the table there.
Okay.
And Michael Hansen, our Director of Finance, and I are going to speak to this quarter's metrics.
Cool.
Oh, I got it.
Good morning. My name is Michael Hansen. I'm the Director of Finance here.
And Trish Collins, HR Manager.
Hi.
This morning, we are very happy to present our second quarter scorecard results at PSTA. We're very proud of our progress we've made so far throughout the first 2 quarters.
I'm glad you handed these out because.
It's a little small up there.
I'm trying to fit it on the screen. You'll notice in the, some of the areas in red in the first quarter are now green, and this demonstrates that we've been using this tool to make improvements in these areas to improve those goals. One of the things, oops.
Hey, what happened? I'm sorry. Just disappeared.
One of the things we've noticed as we work through these first 2 quarters is we have to pay close attention to how we write and define our goals and how we measure them. And this includes factors such as whether we measure them annually or quarterly, or we use a benchmark measure, or a combination of those factors. And the management team and the staff has been getting a lot better over the first 2 quarters at defining these goals and figuring out how to measure them. And throughout this first year, it's a learning experience. We'll probably see some ups and downs, but we've been improving the process, I think. One of the great results we've had from this is that it's leading a lot of performance-driven conversations and activities that we had hoped for that have helped improve our metrics that we're measuring here. So if you'd like to take a few minutes to look over the scorecard, and if you have any questions or comments on any of the items, we'd be happy to answer those questions.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner.
Well, I
Sorry,
just.
I was reading.
Again, and I'm kind of still reading too, so, it seems like, 100, I assume 100 is the top score.
You could, I guess you could, we are allowing a 10% bonus points, so the top score could be over 100.
Okay. It seems like we've already, it's like either our goals aren't high enough or something, because we've already hit 100. It's like, okay, now what? So it's all, so my perspective is I think maybe we need to look at those goals again and make sure that we're pushing ourselves. And that's just a comment. But again, not being critical, just trying to understand how we stretch ourselves if we've already got 100. And then, since ridership, one of the issues that we get asked a lot about, and we have to acknowledge has gone down, seems to me that one could argue that that's a national phenomenon, not necessarily unique to PSTA, but certainly that's not a positive. And I'm, again, just looking, how does that get reflected in here? How do we push ourselves to, have higher ridership, and we're not quite there, and that kind of thing. So just 2 comments as it relates to the performance scorecard. But overall, that looks good.
Mr. Scott?
Thank you. I see in Q2 we actually more than met the goal, exceeded the goal for improved environmental sustainability indicators. How did we went from 5.0, 5 is maximum points, and we got 5.5. How did we do that?
The first quarter goal for that metric was to establish benchmarks for our environmental sustainability programs, and so that met our goal in the first quarter. In the second quarter, that was a measurement based against those benchmarks. Do you have anything that you'd like to share out of planning about that particular metric?
So for that, we measured progress as opposed to like having some big sustainability achievement yet, right? So we've created programs for certain metrics within the APTA sustainability agreement that we would advance, and so we're advancing those. Now, I think it's to your point of, well, it looks like we've met our goal. Well, there's still a lot of work to do to achieve progress in quarters 3 and 4. And so I think we would still need the entire agency to sort of help us through that.
I think, if I recall, there are 12 different measurements that the APTA sustainability process requires you to track. We're going through this process. APTA has this process where you start off at you agree to sign a pledge of sustainability, and then you move up the ladder from bronze, silver, gold, platinum, and we're at bronze. And we're trying to move to silver, but the goal within the scorecard is to make improvements in at least half, for the year, half of the 12, so 6. I think what has actually happened is we've made progress on 3, and what Cassandra was saying, which I think is true, is it's going to be hard for us to get beyond 3. We're doing great on 3, and at least it's looking like we may not be able to get to 6. So.
Right, so we've made progress on emissions.
It's looking green for now, but it's gonna start trending a little bit, maybe not so green.
Is ridership, revenue hours, miles, any of that part of that sustainability component?
Yes. Yes. I mean, they do have you track your own like agency emissions, you know, on the buses and other emissions that your operations, and then they also have a factor that looks at what PSTA is doing for the community, and you know, taking cars off the road, having people ride the bus, and when that goes down, you know, when ridership goes down, that means more cars are on the road. That means theoretically more polluting. So that is a factor. It's
Well,
one
the
of the
reason
12.
I bring that up because it looks, if I read our statistics right, I mean, our ridership is down, which we know, but it looks like revenue miles and revenue hours is up. So it seems like we're going the wrong way in both of those, which is going to lead to less environmental sustainability. So that's why I asked if that was a component of it, because it just strikes me that we've exceeded that goal.
Yeah. Well, I think that is one of the ones that we're not hitting, but again, if we have more hybrid and electric vehicles that not necessarily polluting more, perhaps.
Okay, well, just a
But I think you're right.
observation.
Okay, Mr. Schulman?
So how many of the goals here are, I don't know who the question's for, so whoever wants it. Al, if you want to jump in, you can. How many of these goals are
Pick an idea.
attainment goals versus progress goals? Like, so the one we're just talking about is we're progressing towards versus having attained the goal. Are there other goals here that are in one of those buckets?
It's a mix, I would say.
Okay, because I think I struggle with having a mix and not knowing which one is correct. So if you're saying our goal is 6 in the environmental and sustainability, if we're trying to improve on these 6 metrics, and we've only attained 3, I don't know how in the quarter we have a better than goal score when we have underperformed in total. Now, if the progress is by the end of the second quarter we want 3, and by the end of the third quarter we want 5, and by the end of the year we want 6, then that would mean that we're on target, right?
Yeah, and that's what it
versus
says.
ahead of target. But it doesn't. That's not clear when looking at the goals.
It doesn't say progress.
So, I think that's a lot of what Mike was talking about when we have a discussion, we look at these, piece by piece. So, an example of one of these that we had a robust and spirited discussion about was the number of funding partnerships, right? So the planning department set a goal of 8 for the year, and the scorecard keepers said, well, you're failing because you haven't met 8 by the second quarter. But we said, well, wait a minute, we want to do this by the end of the year, right? So it doesn't matter if we get all 8 in quarter 4, right? It matters that we achieve the goal by the end of the year. So what we did was we backed up and we said, okay, well, let's make it a cumulative. Let's say, all right, you need to have at least 2. We're going to track you using 2 per quarter, and so that's what their mathematics behind the scenes looks like. So we had 5 in the first quarter, so that's fine, but it takes 6, sometimes 12 months to get one of those. So get a funding partnership agreement depending on what it is. So we still have to work ahead. I would see something like that. There were some that we are going to work on this year that we may not achieve until the first quarter of next year. So that's kind of a tricky one where, well, how do you tell if the planning department is doing its job, right? So we have to look at what exactly our funding partnerships are and then what we've got in the pipeline. So back at the ranch, in the planning department, we track what do we think we have on, what do we think we're going to achieve in quarter 3, and then what do we think we're going to achieve in quarter 4, and what do we think is going to take longer. So we're already thinking a little bit further ahead, and to Mike's point about it's not just about the score, it's about the conversation. Now everybody in the agency knows exactly what the planning department is doing and thinking, and when we believe that we're going to achieve our goals, and funding partnerships always make Debbie happy. So I really like to tell her what I'm doing.
So, and I understand that. I remember back to a conversation I'm trying to recall from the first quarter, is we had quarterly goals. Some of these were annual goals, like the legislative one. In the first quarter, there was nothing because the legislature wasn't in session. If I'm the public looking at the scorecard, and to Commissioner Egger's point, it appears that we're firing on all cylinders. There's no room for improvement, and I'm not exactly sure what we're measuring.
If I may,
Yes.
We tried to be very specific in the way we describe the metric and the way we describe the performance goal. So that information is in there to give you an indication of whether this is a goal that we've set for ourselves for the year or whether it's a goal that we're measuring incrementally by the quarter. So for example, the org 1, the very first one on here, our performance goal, we indicated that our quarter 2 goal was to award the contract for this project. So specifying that's an incremental goal that we're meeting on our way towards a larger goal. Something like org 4, state and federal legislative initiative advancements, the performance goal is 2. That's 2 for the entire year. So where there's a goal for the year, there's just a performance number or metric listed in that column. Where it's incremental and it may change from goal to goal, it may change from quarter to quarter as we progress towards our annual goal. That's listed as a Q2 goal, or next quarter it would be our Q3 goal was this, and here's how our performance compared to that.
Is there a way in each of these blocks to keep track of the particular quarter goal that was trying to be achieved and the result?
Yes.
When I look at so we get to Q3, Q4, I can look at this one summary sheet and see, oh, that was our goal in Q1. I have a running versus having to flip through old sheets to find out what the prior goals were.
Yes, we do have backup data that goes into more detail about each of these metrics, so we'll make sure in future quarters that that's attached with what you have, and that lists all 4 quarters goals, and it also lists a little more information about what each goal is measuring.
And it was said twice, and I think it's a good point, that regardless of the score, it's leading to conversations. So are there a couple examples of some of the conversations that are being had based on understanding our metrics better that you can share?
Yeah, I can give a great example. This org 17, annual improvement in below median American bus benchmark group metrics. One of the key reasons that we've made progress in that, taking it from meeting half of our goal last quarter to being on target this quarter, is because James Bradford, our Chief Operating Officer, is the champion of that metric. We have a champion for each one. And he's assembled a task force of all the relevant people who touch on the metrics from the ABBG that we're trying to improve. So who are the people who are involved in lowering passenger injuries and improving driver training? So he's set these task forces together that are interdepartmental, they're meeting on a regular basis, really figuring out what are the driving factors in these metrics, what's possible that we can do to change them, and following up on the actions that are moving forward with that. So I think that's been a great success story and one of the real positive outcomes of launching this.
Any other questions? I have a couple of questions. My friend Patty Johnson's not here, so I'll talk about Org 10 and Org 12, which are blank with regard to paratransit. So what are we doing in that regard, and how come we're not having any kind of a scoring for that?
Well, I think this finance committee approved last month or the month before surveys, onboard surveys, to do an annual survey of riders on both the fixed route system and the paratransit system of the customers. And that is where the Net Promoter Score and the overall customer satisfaction results come from, is going to be that survey, which is now under contract and soon to be launched. The numbers, the green numbers that you see in fixed route for both those are from a survey, the last onboard survey we did a year ago. We've never done a survey of paratransit, so that's why those were blank. But those will soon be filled in. Those will be filled in quarter 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the survey is going to be done in June.
Okay. I'm just anticipation she's going to ask that question next week.
Yeah.
The other question I have is, I'm not exactly clear what we're doing with regard to annual voluntary departures. I see that the goal is greater than 6%. Is that for interviewing people as they leave? What are we doing there?
That goal is to measure how many people leave PSTA who we would otherwise want to have stay. So we're specifically measuring people who leave PSTA because they have quit their positions. And we're aiming for less than 6%, less than or equal to 6% cumulatively for the year.
Okay, so when we received scores of 2.2, which is higher than the goal, what specifically are we doing there?
In order to measure it?
Yeah, in order to get higher than 100% of what we're looking for.
We are, for year to date, looking at how many people have left the organization. So that's a number that will grow naturally as the year progresses. But we're looking at everyone year to date who has left, how many of them left because they quit, which is the metric we're targeting. And as of end of quarter 2, that number is still below 6.
Okay, so that's not someone who retires, or
Exactly.
it's someone who leaves for personal reasons or another position someplace else or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
That number is sometimes called controllable turnover. You might be familiar with that from other businesses, and it's.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's one of the whole overall strategy is to have engaged employees, and a measurement of engaged employees is they're not quitting on you all over the place.
Right. Okay.
Whether or not 6% is a good goal, I think that will be our goal next year is open for question. I mean, if any of these goals that we beat by more than 10% constantly,
Right.
maybe need to be looked at
Okay.
in the future.
All right, any other questions?
Quick question.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Just to follow up to that, what, are drivers included in that?
Yes.
So this is all employees?
All employees.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Oh, one more question?
Yeah,
Commissioner Eggers, I'm
again,
sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Seems like with the things that we're measuring here, a lot of it has created some good internal conversation. So you all are able to kind of review how you're doing and set up. Again, I would speak to the goals, and maybe we need to progress versus performance goals need to be shown a little differently. And the only other thing I was thinking about, and I think we've I don't remember anybody else talking about this other than me keep bringing this fiscal, social, and environmental kind of balance that we have at PSTA, that we shouldn't be excelling at either any one without it probably creating a problem somewhere else in the organization. And so, from an external standpoint, I'm not sure how communicative this is. I think there's a fiscal set of parameters you can show that the environmental parameters, I think from an argument standpoint, I'm the one that keeps talking about diesel, which would drive our environmental balance down a little bit. That should be showing, like, okay, we still have a pretty heavy diesel fleet, and so we're moving in a different direction. But that should be a reflection on the overall performance of PSTA, and to your continued pushing of a hybrid electric or electric, it should be maybe a yellow. It should be something that says, well, I don't know.
On the financial, you're saying?
Well, I'm talking really right now about environmental. I mean, because environmental to me, if you guys, the perfect environmental would be all electric buses. You're not polluting your all the things that go, whatever you're measuring for environmental. My point is, our fleet is still very diesel. So it shouldn't be green. There should be some way to show external facing that we're at yellow right now because we have so many diesel buses. Frankly, it would probably be okay if we were elevating the type of diesel buses, still not to the level of electric. So my point is that I'm just talking about, again, I think this is great for internal, you push each other, you talk about them, I think you set new standards, each of you know exactly what each of these means for this point in time and throughout the year. But I think for the message publicly, I think people will go, well, there's a lot of issues, and there's not showing up here as issues. And so I don't know, that's just a question, again, what this is all about, what it's used for, and what it's supposed to convey externally more than internally.
Okay.
Just a comment.
Thank you, folks, appreciate it. Okay, reports.
We have
Debbie.
a lot of reports today. We've got our monthly reports and our quarterly reports. As we take a look at the financial statements so far this year, we're halfway through the fiscal year. And as we take a look at the month of March, we actually had a negative variance of $145,000. We had budgeted a deficit of a little over $2 million, and we were at $2.2 million. On the revenue side, we were down about $135,000. Contributing to that, our property tax revenue was down. It's just a timing issue, followed by passenger fares, which were 5.4% under budget. We saw as we're going into April, we always are going forward in the next month, we did not, the passenger fares did improve, so that was good news. On the expense side, we're under budget in a lot of areas, but I'd like to point out one area that we were over budget in and have been consistently, and that is our DART expense was up almost 24% or $129,000. On a year-to-date basis, that's up $420,000. So that's one of those areas as we take a look at where we are on a year-to-date. We have robust discussions on what is going on behind DART. We have a new provider that came in last year who's doing an excellent job. What are the contributing factors to this? And how are we going to compensate for this as we go through the budget so that we can stay on target? So that's one of our areas. The other thing is a little bit different this month. Under miscellaneous expense, which is the third line from the bottom, you will see that we had an increase of $23,000 for a quote-unquote bad debt expense. That is where we actually write off when we have submit on claims where we expect a third party to pay us for a certain dollar amount. We put in a receivable for that, and if we don't collect it all, we write it off. Now, we put in quite a bit into that number, including the time that Henry's Group may put into repairing our buses. We don't always expect to get everything back. Again, I think we're creating conversations that haven't been had before, where if we know something isn't likely to happen, that when we put in for the receivable, we're still going to ask for it, but we may set aside an allowance for this bad debt so we don't have these ups and downs as we go through. So this was one of those areas where it related to a claims expense being written.
What are those examples of those?
For example, and maybe Diane can speak to it, but we will, like I said, we'll put in for Henry repairing the buses. Some insurance carriers will pay for all of it, or some of it, some will not. And are there any other good examples, Diane?
Yes, we actually had one recently that we had our internal estimate was in the 80,000s to repair the bus. Based on the value of the bus, the carrier said we're going to total it because the value of the bus was less than it was to repair it. So in a situation like that, we have to end up totaling to get the recovery, we end up having to compromise on that because there are certain rules regarding the value of a vehicle and when it's repairable and when it's actually totaled. So, of course, to us, we can repair. We want to repair it and get our vehicles back on the road. But when someone from the outside is looking at, they're looking at straight numbers. So that's one example that happened recently.
Okay, thanks.
But if we look at the next page, on a year-to-date basis, we're doing extremely well. Halfway through the fiscal year, our surplus of $21.2 million is $686,000 favorable to budget. Again, we are seeing right now on the revenue side, revenues are down $216,000. And a lot of that is due to just timing of the state grants. We'll catch up on that through the course of the year. Again, they don't always get the grants to us on a timely basis at the beginning of the fiscal year. So when that happens, we just end up catching up later than we thought. On the expense side, we are under budget in a lot of areas, and it's helping to compensate for the DART expense, which is up $420,000. Are there any questions on the financials?
Any questions?
Just one.
Go ahead. Commissioner Shaw?
What is the explanation for the fringe benefit expense being?
We have a significant number of unfilled vacancies, primarily in the bus operator area. But what we are seeing as a result of that is our overtime expense is up. And that's one of those things we're just having great discussions on as well.
Okay.
Also, I was going to say, in here, we have a host of quarterly reports. Michael, would you like to say anything about the reserves and investments report?
Sure. Currently, our investment balance is about $64.4 million through March 31st. The majority of that's invested with Bank United now. I think we have one account left with SunTrust, which will be closing soon. I will mention that next quarter you'll see the interest rate. Bank United's raised our interest rates now on our money market accounts to 1.65%, so that'll bring in a lot more interest through the remaining of the fiscal year. On the reserves report, out of that $64.4 million, $303,000 is set aside for FTA restricted funds. We have our 2-month operating reserve, about $12.4 million, our $4 million self-insurance reserve, and our capital reserve is sitting at about $26.6 million.
Okay, any questions?
The other reports that we have included in here for your reading pleasure are the fuel report. And as we're looking to next year's budget at this point in time, I'm crying into my towel at the price of fuel.
Yeah.
You and me both.
So,
Yeah.
Fortunately, the efforts that the maintenance team, the fleet team, has really put into our vehicles is actually in the fact that we're increasing the number of hybrids into our fleet. We are actually seeing a decrease in the, I should say, an increase that we get in the miles per gallon. So we're improving on our fuel efficiency, which will help a little bit, but not enough that it doesn't make me cry at night.
Do we have amounts still left on our
We do.
pre-bought fuel?
Through this fiscal year, yes. Going into next fiscal year, as I look out every day, actually the near term is higher than going further out into the year.
Uh-huh.
And every day, it just seems like it changes up and down significantly.
But the
More
trend's
up,
been-
Yeah.
more up.
We're okay this year, it's next year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
That we're looking at. I've also included in here a report on where we are with health insurance so far today. We're doing extremely well with health insurance costs. So that's another area that's a big cost item for us as we look to the budget for next year. So that's good news for us as we start to negotiate on that. We also have a host of project reports in here, and you can take a look at that at your leisure. One of the things that'll be coming up in this next quarter that'll be noteworthy is the receipt of our electric buses.
Okay,
Nothing extraordinarily noteworthy, but we've completed quite a bit this quarter.
good. Yes, Commissioner Schulman.
Question, I'm not sure if it's, who goes to, definitely not Al. The cost of fuel, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, right? So, yes, it costs us more, but then there's an expectation that there will be more riders,
Right.
as fuel costs go. Is there, from the benchmarking group, is there like a target dollar amount from a behavior standpoint that tends to lead to greater ridership as far as fuel costs? Are you familiar with any studies or analysis on that?
There are some studies like that. Most folks say it's like a psychological thing, and it doesn't really hit in a big way until $4 a gallon at the pump
Okay.
to really change behavior. I mean, for now, at least right now, it's just costing people more. And we are seeing, I think, maybe a slight,
Less decrease.
we are definitely seeing a lower decrease over the last couple of months. Some of that's due to spring break and everything.
So we're potentially in a window now where we are experiencing greater costs on the operating side and not have yet hit that trigger point on the consumer side to increase ridership. So we're in kind of like
Correct.
a gap period.
I would say,
Where we might see
yeah,
those. Okay.
generally.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you both, I appreciate it. Keep up the good work.
But in a month's time, when you see our draft FY19 budget, the issues that Debbie just raised are the ones that we're really focused on.
Right.
The fuel is one issue. DART.
Yeah.
As you move on now to look at the ridership report, yes, fixed route is down, but this is the second month in a row that DART is at an all-time high. We pay per trip on that.
Mhm.
And if it keeps growing, that will have a substantially bigger fiscal impact on our overall budget than the fuel will, if we can't control DART, because we're obligated to provide all those trips. When they call, we have to provide the ride. We can't turn people away. So we, like Trish talked about, James setting up a task force to look at some of the other stats. Now we have a task force on looking at DART
Mhm.
and other things we might be able to do, and work with Care Ride. It's just so popular. I'm not too worried about that survey. They love it so much that they're riding all over the place on it.
Mhm.
But that's gonna have a major impact, and then that overtime. And this is something I brought up at the state conference with the other trans systems, of ways in which other trans systems might be looking at, in this robust economy, hiring drivers. And after like 2 people, they said, well, they didn't want to reveal any of their secrets, because they thought that maybe we were stealing from each other. So, so we've got some ideas, but we are down, as was mentioned, constantly hiring and trying to refill, but we are losing drivers for retirements and other reasons, and we're substantially below, which is really hitting the overtime then, because the service dog has to go at time and a half rather than straight time.
Are we obligated to, oh, I shouldn't say that, are drivers obligated to take overtime, or certain, some want it, some don't, that kind of thing? For the
Yeah, well, there's a whole
It's in the union,
process in place to who gets the overtime, I mean, who gets the overtime and who doesn't, and all
Right.
that. But when the number of positions are not, when there's a whole bunch of vacant positions,
Mhm.
which we're down about, I think, 15 or so,
So. if-
that's all filled with overtime.
So what Debbie's saying then is if we're down on drivers, then we're up on overtime, but we're also down on the expense of benefits. So-
Right.
So that offsets it somewhat, so you have to sort of do a balancing act between all those different, I assume it's partially because of the pay scale for entry-level drivers as opposed to, and the fact that we have a low unemployment rate, a high employment rate
Yeah.
right now. Okay. All right, yeah.
Is there a state or federal limit on the number of hours a driver can drive?
Yes.
And how are we hitting those numbers with drivers? Are we conceivably at a point where everyone has maxed out their hours and we still have service that is not being delivered?
Well, if you're asking me if we do something that's illegal, I'm
No,
saying
I'm saying, I'm saying,
I don't
you
know.
know, are 70% of our driver population hitting their max and therefore not able to, you know, or are we at 99% of our
No,
drivers?
I don't think
hitting
that's
their-
really
you know,
big.
I'm trying to gauge the amount of extra capacity that exists within the framework, not saying that we're over the framework.
I think we have capacity. You know, we're not missing trips. We are getting the drivers to work overtime in a compliant way.
Okay. Enough said.
It's just costing us. I think we're tipped over the edge on saving on benefits, but we're spending more on overtime. So
Right.
we're coming up with strategies on ways
Okay.
to get more bodies in here.
Okay. All right, well, thank you both. Appreciate your details on this. Thank you. Okay.
If you drove in on Shared Drive, you see across the street, they have a big, huge flying flag that says now hiring, apply. We're gonna have
Yeah.
competing little flags.
Really?
With the company across the street.
Oh, wow.
Just go over the marker and write for PSTA on
Yeah.
the flag. And with an arrow that says across the street.
Oh, to go steal it and put it over here?
No, just leave their flag with an arrow pointing over to it.
Hey, Brad, I have a question, and maybe more for Henry perhaps, but the replacement connector vehicles, when are they, were we supposed
That's
to
a
already
good
have those?
question.
When are they coming?
Thank you for asking.
I'm looking at the capital project.
Oh, okay.
Reports.
Okay.
There's a lot of pages, I just haven't.
Okay, yeah,
So obviously, there's been a delay since us receiving them. A lot of that came from the manufacturer, which is Turtle Top, and there was some issues at Freightliner with keeping up with production. So I believe they're arriving in Orlando now for some final installations, namely the bike rack. So we should be receiving those at least starting next week.
Cool. Do we put the decals and stuff like that on them, Henry?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
One other quick question for Henry. I'm just looking at, I see the brake, performance brake test dynamometer. How do we currently test brakes?
We use a Vericom system, which is based off the G-force within a certain amount of distance and speed, and also we compare that to the required stopping distance under.
That's what we use too. I was just curious if what we were doing now. So you think this is? Why do you think this will be better than that?
This is just going to add another layer of testing. We assume that we'll use it annually, and then it's just another layer to be sure that we're in compliance with federal motor vehicle standards.
Thanks.
Okay, anything we need to know on future subjects? We should make this small. No?
So you have a pretty good list there.
Yeah.
Schedule.
All right.
We're getting into budget season now.
Yeah. All right. So if there are no other issues, we'll adjourn, and then the planning committee is going to be here at 10:30, is that correct?
Yeah, we have a grant. We have our annual capital public hearing, which I think is 10:30? 10:30.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for all our participants.
Commissioner Eggers, is he okay today? He's a little low energy.
I do?
Yeah, maybe just thoughtful today? Extra thoughtful?
I thought you were looking nice and trim and.
Well,
You
I don't
are
know.
looking trim.
I went
but-
running this morning, so I'm
Okay.
kind of.
Maybe just sort of like
Covering some of that.
chill.
Yeah,
Is that like a chill look?
I'm trying